The sun was high above the crowded city, spilling golden rays across the dusty highway. The noise of traffic, the impatient honks, and the constant rush of life blurred together into a restless background. People were in a hurry, as they always were, lost in their own worlds, unwilling to stop for even a heartbeat. On this busy road, destiny had written a scene that would change two lives forever. Bublo, the only son of one of the wealthiest men in the city, was returning from a late lunch. Though he carried the weight of his father's name, his own life was reckless. He was spoiled, careless, and too sure that the world would always bend in his favor. His expensive car followed behind him with his driver, but Bublo, with his arrogance, had chosen to cross the road on foot, carrying a packet of fast food. He laughed to himself, ignoring the heavy vehicles rushing past. One careless step, one distracted moment, and fate played its cruel hand. A massive truck screeched, its brakes screaming against the asphalt, but the momentum was too strong. The next second, Bublo was on the ground, pinned dangerously under the edge of the truck, his food scattered across the road. Fries spilling like fallen sticks, a drink bottle rolling away, the burger crushed. The busy road froze for a moment. Dozens of eyes turned, dozens of hearts skipped a beat, but not a single pair of hands reached out. People whispered, pointed, some even pulled out their phones to record the incident. Everyone recognized him, Bublo, the millionaire's son. They muttered that help would arrive soon, that such a boy was not their responsibility, that someone richer, stronger, more equipped would take care of him. And so they stood by as if spectators at a cruel play. In the chaos of this indifference, Pinky walked along the roadside. She was a maid in a wealthy household, but today she was not at work. With her baby tied to her chest in a worn cloth, she was heading home after buying a few vegetables with the little money she had saved. Her life was simple, filled with struggles, yet her eyes always carried kindness. When she saw the crowd gathering near the truck, her first thought was fear. Had there been an accident? She pushed her way through, and her gaze fell upon the sight that froze her blood. There lay Bublo, his face pale, his body trembling, one hand desperately reaching out as if pleading for life itself. No one was helping him. His expensive shoes, his branded watch, the smell of his cologne, everything screamed of wealth. But at that moment he was just a human being, vulnerable and broken. Pinky felt her chest tighten. Her baby stirred against her, sensing her mother's heartbeat racing. People were murmuring, "It's dangerous. What if the truck moves? What if he is already gone? Why risk it?" Their excuses angered her. Pinky's conscience would not allow her to walk away. She could not imagine leaving someone's son to die while she had the strength to help. Without thinking twice, she shifted her baby carefully to her back, securing him tightly, and crawled beneath the dangerous shadow of the truck. Her hands trembled, but her determination was stronger. "Hold on," she whispered to Bublo, her voice steady, filled with humanity that not even poverty had taken from her. "You are not alone." Bublo's eyes widened as he saw her. In his pain, he recognized something he had rarely witnessed before: selfless courage. He wanted to speak, but his voice cracked, his throat dry. She placed one arm firmly under his shoulders, pulling with all her might, while her other arm grabbed his hand with the grip of someone who refused to let go. Her baby whimpered softly against her, but she did not falter. Inch by inch, with sweat dripping down her face, she dragged Bublo from under the looming weight of death. Finally, with one last pull, she brought him into the open. The crowd gasped, yet still no one came forward to assist. Some even clapped half-heartedly, as if they had just witnessed entertainment. Pinky ignored them. She gently laid Bublo on the ground, her hands checking his pulse, her eyes searching for wounds. He was alive, though weak, shaken, and bruised. The men in suits, security guards from his family's company, arrived running moments later, pushing people aside. They looked at Pinky, then at Bublo, and for the first time realized who had saved him. One of them muttered, "Madam, step away, we will handle this." But Bublo, gathering what little strength he had, tightened his grip on Pinky's hand. His lips whispered hoarsely, "Don't go." Pinky was stunned. She had expected anger, arrogance, or at least dismissal. But in that fragile moment, Bublo's pride had shattered. He looked at her not as a servant, not as a poor woman, but as his savior. The crowd began to disperse, losing interest now that drama had ended. The truck driver wept, swearing it had been an accident, and the guards handled him. But Bublo's focus remained only on the woman who had risked everything for him. When the ambulance finally arrived, the guards tried to push Pinky aside again, but Bublo resisted. "She stays," he said weakly. "She saved me. She comes with me." His tone carried an authority none could argue with. And so, Pinky, with her baby, entered the ambulance with the millionaire's son. As the sirens wailed and the city blurred past the windows, she sat silently, holding her child, her mind restless. She had not done this for recognition, nor for reward. She had done it because her heart refused to let her walk away. She whispered prayers for his recovery, not even realizing how drastically her own life was about to change. At the hospital, doctors rushed to attend to Bublo. Pinky stood outside the room, rocking her baby, her clothes dusty, her hands trembling from exhaustion. She wondered if she should leave now. After all, she was no one important, just a maid who had stumbled upon fate's cruel game. But before she could slip away, Bublo's father arrived. A tall, powerful man with a presence that made the air tense. His eyes, full of fear, softened when the doctors assured him his son was safe. Then, hearing from the guards how Bublo had been saved, he turned his gaze toward Pinky. At first, he saw only a poor woman, her baby clinging to her, her clothes worn out. But then, as he noticed Bublo refusing to release her hand even in unconsciousness, the truth struck him. This maid, nameless to the world, had done what an entire crowd had failed to do. She had saved his heir. The father's voice broke the silence. "What is your name?" "Pinky," she answered quietly, lowering her gaze. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You may not know it yet, but today, you have become a part of my son's story, and perhaps a part of ours too." Pinky did not understand what he meant. All she knew was that she had done what was right. Yet deep inside, a strange current of destiny had already begun to weave her life into theirs. For Bublo, lying weak on the hospital bed, the face of the woman who had not abandoned him burned into his memory. For the first time in his life, he felt humbled, grateful, and strangely safe. And for Pinky, unaware of what lay ahead, the path she had chosen with honesty, hard work, and humanity was about to be tested in ways she could never imagine. That night in the hospital, Bublo woke several times in pain. Each time, the first face he looked for was not the nurse, not his father, but Pinky's. She sat quietly in the corner, rocking her baby, humming a lullaby to keep him asleep. The room was expensive, shining with polished floors and expensive curtains, but her presence was like a different light, simple, human, and strangely comforting. When the doctor came for rounds, Bublo asked in a weak voice, "Is she allowed to stay here?" The doctor nodded politely, though confused, and said, "Of course, if that's what you want." Bublo's father, standing by the door, noticed the unusual attachment. He had never seen his son care about anyone outside of his rich circle, yet here he was, insisting on the presence of a poor maid. The father pulled the doctor aside later, whispering, "She saved his life. Perhaps that explains it." But deep down, the man wondered if there was something more. Pinky, on the other hand, felt restless. She had never spent time in such a luxurious place. The nurses looked at her with suspicion, the guards with impatience. She felt like an outsider, an intruder in a world that was not hers. Yet, every time she thought of leaving, Bublo's weak hand would reach for hers again. "Don't go," he whispered, and her heart softened. She could never refuse someone in pain. Days passed, and Bublo's condition improved. Soon he could sit up in bed, though his body still ached. With each passing day he spoke more to Pinky. First, just short words of gratitude. Then questions about her life. He learned she was a maid, earning barely enough to feed her baby. Her husband had left years ago, and she had been surviving alone. She worked tirelessly, cleaning houses, washing clothes, cooking meals for families who never even looked her in the eye. "And yet you risked everything for me?" Bublo asked one evening, his eyes searching hers. Pinky looked down at her baby, stroking his hair. "Because you were someone's son. If my child were lying on that road, wouldn't I pray for someone to help him? We are all human, Bublo. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter when life is at stake." Her words pierced his heart. He had grown up in a world where wealth was everything, where people bowed to him for money, not respect. And yet here was a woman who had nothing, yet gave everything without expecting reward. For the first time, Bublo felt ashamed of his past arrogance. One afternoon, after his father had left for a meeting, Bublo asked Pinky, "Do you believe everyone has a price?" She frowned, not understanding. "In my world," he explained, "everyone can be bought. Loyalty, friendship, even love. Everything has a price. People only come close to me because of my father's wealth. But you," his voice trailed off, "you risked your life with no promise of reward." "Why?" Pinky smiled faintly. "Because my honesty is not for sale. Poverty teaches many things, Bublo, but it should never take away your humanity. I may not have gold, but I have dignity, and that is worth more than money." Her words stayed with him long after she had spoken them. It was during this time that Bublo's father began to observe Pinky more carefully. At first, he had thought his son's attachment to her was temporary, a passing gratitude. But as days turned into weeks, he realized something deeper was unfolding. Bublo was changing. He was no longer demanding, no longer arrogant with the staff. He listened when Pinky spoke, and he even smiled, something the father had not seen in a long time. One evening, the father called Pinky aside. His tone was polite though firm. "You saved my son's life, and for that, I owe you more than words. But you must understand, our world is different from yours. Men like Bublo are surrounded by opportunists. I need to know, why are you really here?" Pinky lowered her gaze, holding her baby close. "I don't want anything from you, sir. I stayed because he asked me not to leave. That's all. I am poor, yes, but my honesty is not so cheap. If you don't want me here, I will go." The father studied her carefully. He had seen countless people beg for money, power, or favors. But this woman, she offered to leave even when she had the chance to stay in comfort. Something about her struck him as rare. For now, he allowed her to remain, but deep inside he began to plan. When Bublo was discharged, he insisted that Pinky and her baby come with him to their mansion. The staff were shocked when she walked through the grand doors. Her simple clothes and tired face a stark contrast to the glittering chandeliers and marble floors. Some whispered that she was a fraud, others that she had bewitched the young master. But Bublo silenced them with one sentence. "She saved my life. She deserves respect." That night, When Pinky laid her baby down on a small bed prepared for her, she could not help but feel uneasy. She did not belong here. Yet, she remembered Bublo's pale face under the truck, the way he had clung to her hand, the way his father had looked at her with strange curiosity. Something told her that destiny was pulling her into a story she had not chosen. The following days brought the first of many tests. Bublo's father wanted to see if Pinky was truly what she appeared to be: honest, kind, and incorruptible. He left large sums of money on the table in the guest room, pretending it was forgotten. Pinky saw it every day, but never touched it. She would cover it with a cloth, fearing her baby might grab the notes, but she never once thought of keeping it. Later, he placed a gold necklace carelessly near the sink where she washed her hands. Again, Pinky noticed it, picked it up, and handed it to the maid in charge, saying, "Someone forgot this." The staff were shocked. Most would have hidden such treasure, but she did not even hesitate. Bublo watched all this quietly, his respect for her growing. He had seen friends betray him for far less. But this woman, who had nothing, valued honesty more than wealth. Each day, he found himself drawn to her courage, her simplicity, her humanity. The father, too, began to soften. He realized that the woman he had thought of as just a poor maid was something rare. And though he would never admit it yet, he began to wonder if perhaps she was the kind of influence his son needed. One evening, Bublo asked her softly, "Do you regret saving me that day?" Pinky looked at him in surprise. "Why would I regret it?" "Because your life could have ended under that truck too. You have a baby. You risked everything for someone you didn't even know." Pinky smiled faintly, her eyes shining with quiet strength. "Some choices are not made with the mind, Bublo. They are made with the heart. I only know one thing: if I had walked away, I would not be able to live with myself. Life is precious, no matter whose it is." In that moment, Bublo realized something he had never felt before: respect. True, unshakable respect for another human being. And with it came gratitude, admiration, and something deeper he dared not name yet. As the night settled over the mansion, the city lights glowing in the distance, Bublo lay awake, his mind restless. Pinky's words echoed in his head. He knew his father was planning something. He could feel it, but for the first time he didn't resist. Perhaps his father was right. This woman was different. And perhaps, just perhaps, his life had been spared that day under the truck for a reason. The mansion settled into its quiet rhythm once again after Bublo's recovery, yet something had undeniably shifted within its walls. The servants whispered about the maid who had saved the heir, the woman who walked in halls meant only for the wealthy. Pinky tried to keep herself small, unnoticed, as though she could blend into the background, but it was impossible. She was no longer just another maid. She had crossed an invisible boundary the day she had pulled Bublo from under the truck, and now everyone, whether in admiration or resentment, watched her closely. Bublo's father, a man of discipline and calculation, was among those watching most carefully. He was not a man easily impressed. His empire of businesses had been built on strategy, patience, and a sharp understanding of people. He could read dishonesty in a handshake, greed in a smile, betrayal in silence. And yet this woman puzzled him. Poor, widowed, with nothing but a child clinging to her, she should have been vulnerable to temptation. Money, gold, luxury, these were tools that broke even the strongest of wills. But she had passed every small test he had placed before her inside the mansion. One morning, as Bublo sipped his coffee in the dining room, his father entered with an unusual look in his eyes. "Bublo," he said, "I have been thinking. Gratitude is not enough to honor what Pinky has done. If she is truly as capable as she seems, then we must give her an opportunity to prove it." Bublo glanced at him warily. He knew that tone. His father was planning something bigger than simply offering charity. "What are you thinking?" His father's gaze shifted to Pinky, who had just entered with her baby in her arms, ready to leave for the servants' quarters. "I want to see what she does with power," he said simply. The words startled both Bublo and Pinky. She stopped in her tracks, looking confused. "Sir?" she asked softly, uncertain if she had misheard. "You have shown honesty in small matters," the father explained, his deep voice steady. "But honesty at home is one thing. Honesty in the world outside, where greed, pressure, and influence play their games, is another. I want you to work in my office, a manager's position." The entire room went silent. Bublo set his cup down. The servants nearby exchanged stunned glances. A maid in a manager's position? It was unthinkable. Pinky's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. "Sir, me? I have never worked in an office. I have never managed anything. I am not educated like your people. I clean floors, wash clothes. That is all I know." The father raised a hand to silence her. "And yet you saved my son's life with no training, no preparation. You showed courage, judgment, and strength when others failed. Those qualities matter more than degrees sometimes. I will give you guidance. The question is, do you have the courage to step into this new test?" Pinky felt her heart race. The idea of stepping into a world of glass buildings, polished desks, and sharp-suited employees terrified her. She looked down at her baby, asleep against her chest. For him, she would face anything. She nodded slowly. "If you believe I can do it, then I will try." Bublo's father nodded in satisfaction. Bublo, however, watched with concern. He knew his father well. This was not just about giving Pinky a chance. It was an examination, a way to see if she would bend under the weight of power. But part of him also wanted to see her succeed. The following week, Pinky stepped into the grand office building, her heart pounding. She wore the simplest clothes she owned, freshly washed and ironed. But in the sea of tailored suits, she felt painfully out of place. The receptionist looked at her with doubt. But when the chairman's order was mentioned, no one dared to question. She was given a desk, an assistant to guide her, and a title manager of operations for a small division of the company. The first days were overwhelming. Pinky barely understood the technical terms, the files stacked before her, or the meetings where people spoke in fast English filled with business jargon. Some employees whispered behind her back, mocking the chairman's decision. "A maid managing us? This is an insult," one sneered. "She won't last a week." Pinky heard their whispers, but she kept her head down. Each night, after putting her baby to sleep in the small apartment the company had arranged, she studied the files, memorized words she didn't understand, and asked questions without shame. She had survived poverty, hunger, and loneliness. She would survive this too. Bublo visited often, quietly encouraging her. He admired her persistence. "Most people in your place would have quit," he told her one evening as he found her still working late at her desk. "Why don't you?" "Because quitting doesn't feed my baby," she replied simply. "And because I promised your father I would try. I cannot betray my word." Her answer struck him. He had grown up among people who quit at the slightest discomfort, who broke promises as easily as they made them. Yet here was Pinky holding on with both hands, no matter how difficult the climb. It wasn't long before the first real test arrived. One afternoon, a businessman visited her division, offering her a discreet envelope under the table. "Just sign these papers without asking questions," he said with a smile, "and you will never have to worry about money again. Think of your child. Think of the life you could give him." Pinky froze, her fingers brushing against the envelope. For a fleeting second, the temptation gnawed at her. A new life, freedom from poverty, a secure future for her son. It was all in her grasp. She closed her eyes, hearing the echo of her own words. My honesty is not for sale. Pushing the envelope back across the table, she looked the man in the eye. My son will grow up proud of me, not ashamed. Take your money and leave. The man left in anger, but unknown to Pinky, Bublo's father had been watching from behind the tinted glass of his private office. He had sent the man himself another trap. When he saw her reject it without hesitation, a rare smile touched his stern face. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Pinky began to earn respect. She was fair with her employees, treating them with kindness rather than arrogance. She listened to their problems, helped solve them, and never took credit for what wasn't hers. Even those who had mocked her in the beginning began to admire her sincerity. Her division's performance improved, not through cunning deals, but through honesty and hard work. Bublo, watching all this, felt his admiration deepen into something warmer, something he tried to hide. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, untainted by greed, unshaken by power, driven only by her heart. Each time he saw her carrying her baby into the office, balancing motherhood and responsibility with grace, his respect grew. His father, too, continued to test her in secret. Sometimes he would give her authority to make decisions involving large sums of money. Other times, he would deliberately create conflicts among employees to see if she would misuse her power. Each time, she surprised him, choosing fairness over favoritism, honesty over gain. One evening, after another long day at work, Pinky stood at the office window, her baby asleep in her arms, gazing at the glittering city lights. Bublo joined her quietly. You've changed this place, he said softly. She shook her head. No, I am just doing what anyone should do. Be fair. Be honest. Not anyone, Bublo corrected. Most people fail these tests, but you passed them all. His voice carried something unspoken, something deeper, but Pinky pretended not to notice. In the silence that followed, both of them realized something had begun to grow between them. Something fragile, unacknowledged, yet undeniable. And far above in his private office, Bublo's father watched them both, his mind already racing ahead. He had tested her with money, with gold, with power. Soon, he would test her with something far more difficult, the raw face of humanity itself. The glow of success in the office had not blinded Pinky. Though her division had flourished, though employees had grown to respect her, she remained as humble as she had been the day she entered the mansion with dust on her clothes and her baby on her chest. She never once forgot that she was still a maid at heart, that her real treasure was not the office, not the power, but her honesty and the small child who depended on her. Bublo, however, noticed the change in her more keenly than anyone. He saw how the light in her eyes grew stronger each time she overcame an obstacle. He saw how people's perception of her shifted from suspicion to admiration. And every night when he thought of her, he found himself restless. Respect had grown into affection, and affection was growing into something he dared not admit. He had always believed his world and hers were too different to ever meet, yet destiny seemed intent on weaving them closer together. His father noticed it too. The chairman had not built an empire without recognizing the hidden movements of people's hearts. He saw the way his son looked at Pinky. He saw the unspoken bond forming between them. And though he did not oppose it, he was not ready to accept it either. Not yet. He needed to be absolutely certain. And so, one evening, as Bublo sat with him in the study, his father spoke in a low, deliberate tone. She has passed every test I have given her, with money, with gold, with power. But there is one final test. One that will prove if her heart is truly as pure as we believe. Bublo tensed. He already suspected what was coming. What do you mean? His father leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. Wealth can tempt. Authority can corrupt. But true character is revealed when a person is stripped of everything and left at the mercy of the world. I want to see how she behaves when she has nothing. Bublo's brows furrowed. She already had nothing before. She was poor, struggling, raising a child alone. And still she helped me. Exactly, his father replied. But that was instinct. This time it will be deliberate. I will put her on the street, disguised as one of the helpless. I want to see if, even then, she chooses to give rather than take. Bublo's jaw tightened. He hated the idea of Pinky being humiliated, forced into a situation that was beneath her dignity. Yet he also knew his father well. There was no arguing when the man's mind was made up. And if she passes? He asked quietly. The father's voice softened in an unusual way. Then she is the woman I have been searching for all my life, the kind who deserves to stand beside my son. Bublo said nothing more. Deep inside, his heart already knew she would pass. The plan was put into motion. The very next day, Pinky was summoned by the chairman. He told her bluntly, I want you to understand the life of those who beg on the roadside. Tomorrow you will live a day as one of them. You will not take money from us. You will not reveal who you are. Survive as they survive. Show me what you learn. Pinky was stunned. First she thought she had misheard. A maid in a mansion, then a manager in an office, and now a beggar on the street? The contrast was almost cruel. Sir, you want me to beg? Yes, the father said firmly. This is not punishment. This is a test. You speak often of humanity, of dignity. I want to see if those words hold when you are pushed to the edge. Her heart raced. The thought of standing on the roadside, holding her baby, asking strangers for coins, it filled her with shame. Yet she knew she could not refuse. If this was her test, she would face it as she had faced every other. She bowed her head. As you wish. The following morning, dressed in old, tattered clothes given by the servants, Pinky stood by the roadside, her baby tied against her back. Dust clung to her feet, the sun burned overhead, and the noise of traffic pressed into her ears. She lowered her gaze, stretched her hand out, and waited. Passers-by glanced at her, most with indifference. Some frowned, muttering about how beggars were a nuisance. A few dropped coins into her hand without looking. Pinky swallowed her pride with every coin, whispering a quiet prayer for the one who gave. Hours passed and she grew weary. Her baby whimpered with hunger. She had collected barely enough to buy a piece of bread. As she walked toward a stall, however, her eyes fell upon another beggar nearby. A frail old woman, her hands trembling, her body too weak to rise. The woman's bowl was empty. She had received nothing all day. Pinky froze. Her baby's hunger burned against her chest, but so did her conscience. She looked at the small coins in her palm. If she bought bread, her child would eat tonight. If she gave it away, they would go hungry. Her throat tightened. For a long moment, she stood torn between love for her child and compassion for a stranger. Then, with trembling hands, she walked to the old woman and placed the coins in her bowl. The woman looked up, her eyes filling with tears, whispering blessings that broke Pinky's heart. That night, Pinky fed her baby with milk borrowed from a kind shopkeeper who recognized her struggle. She herself went to bed hungry. What she did not know was that Bublo had been watching from a distance the entire time, hidden in a car parked across the road. He had seen the way she resisted temptation, the way she gave even when she had nothing, the way she chose another's suffering over her own comfort. His chest tightened with pride, and something deeper, stronger. He had never admired anyone so much. His father, too, had been informed of everything. When Pinky returned the next morning, exhausted but with her dignity intact, he looked at her differently. For the first time, his stern eyes softened completely. "You have passed every test," he said quietly. "Not just with honesty, but with humanity. You are the kind of person this world needs." Pinky bowed her head, relief washing over her. She did not do it for praise, nor for reward. She did it because her heart could not let her act otherwise. Bublo's father studied her for a long moment, then turned to his son. "Bublo," he said, "you were right to hold on to this woman. She is rare. And perhaps she is the one I have been waiting for you to find." Bublo's heart leapt, but he kept his composure. For now, it was enough that his father finally saw what he had seen from the beginning. Pinky was not just a maid, not just a savior, not just a test passed. She was the woman who had changed his life forever. And deep inside, he knew his journey with her was only just beginning. The mansion was no longer the same after Pinky returned from the roadside test. The servants, who once mocked her, now treated her with awe. They had seen people come and go, but none had ever earned the respect of the master so quickly. Pinky carried herself the same as always, modest, quiet, dedicated to her child. But even she could sense the shift. Bublo's father, who once looked at her with suspicion, now regarded her with something close to admiration. The change was subtle at first. A softer tone when addressing her, a thoughtful silence whenever she spoke. But soon it became impossible to ignore. He began asking her opinions on matters that had nothing to do with her duties, testing her wisdom as much as her honesty. And each time, she surprised him with clarity, with simple truths that cut deeper than complicated strategies. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, the father spoke openly for the first time. "Pinky," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I have tested you in every way I know, with wealth, with power, with survival. And each time you proved your worth. You are not like others. You are rare." Pinky lowered her gaze, uncomfortable with such praise. "Sir, I only did what was right." The father turned to Bublo, his eyes steady. "You once asked me if there were people in this world who could not be bought. I doubted it. But now I see I was wrong. She is living proof." Bublo's heart pounded. His father had never spoken this way about anyone outside their circle. For a fleeting second, Bublo wondered if this was the moment to reveal what he felt, but his courage failed him. Instead, he simply said, "I told you." The father nodded, his gaze lingering on Pinky. "If my son were to choose a woman like her, I would not object." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The servants nearby froze, eyes wide. Pinky's hands trembled around the spoon she held. She looked up quickly, shocked, her cheeks burning. "Sir, please, do not say such things. I am just a maid. I do not belong in your family." But Bublo's father only smiled faintly. "Belonging is not about wealth, Pinky. It is about values. And in that, you have more than many born into privilege." That night, Pinky lay awake in her small room, her baby asleep beside her. Her heart raced with confusion. Marriage? To Bublo? The very thought was impossible, yet the idea would not leave her mind. She tried to remind herself that she was poor, that she had no right to dream such dreams. And yet, deep inside, a fragile seed of hope had been planted. Bublo, too, lay awake, his mind restless. He had long buried his feelings, afraid of his father's disapproval. But now, with his father himself opening the door, he wondered if the time had come. He thought of Pinky's courage, her honesty, her smile when she comforted her baby. He realized he could no longer keep it inside. The following days were filled with quiet tension. Bublo found himself drawn to Pinky more than ever, lingering in the office where she worked, inventing excuses to speak with her. She noticed, of course, but avoided meeting his gaze. She feared what she might see there. It wasn't long before the outside world caught wind of the whispers inside the mansion. Business partners, distant relatives, and high society friends began to murmur. The idea of the millionaire's heir marrying a maid spread like wildfire. Some laughed at it as a ridiculous rumor, others condemned it as a disgrace. Invitations to parties slowed, subtle insults were whispered, and a few bold voices confronted Bublo's father directly. "Have you lost your mind?" one associate scoffed during a dinner. "Your son, tied to a servant? Do you not care about your family's reputation?" The father's jaw tightened. "I care about honesty more than reputation." But the pressure mounted. Newspapers hinted at scandal. Reporters tried to dig into Pinky's past, twisting her struggles into shameful stories. The servants in the mansion began to waver once again, some whispering that perhaps she would bring ruin to the family. Through it all, Pinky remained steady. She did not lash out at the whispers, nor did she shrink away in shame. She continued her work, cared for her baby, and spoke with the same quiet dignity as always. Bublo admired her even more for it. One evening, unable to hold back any longer, Bublo found her in the garden. She was sitting on a bench, humming softly to her baby. The moonlight fell gently on her face, and Bublo felt his chest tighten. He sat beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke in a low, trembling voice. "Pinky, do you know what you mean to me?" She looked at him, startled. "Bublo, please don't say." "No," he interrupted gently. "I have to say it. You saved my life. But it's not just that. You saved my heart. You showed me what honesty looks like, what courage feels like, what humanity truly is. I have never respected anyone the way I respect you. And I love you." Pinky's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hold them back. "Bublo, this cannot be. You are a rich man. I am nothing but a maid. People will never accept it." "Let them not accept it," he said fiercely. "I don't care about them. I care about you. I care about the life we could build together. You and your baby. You're already part of me." She shook her head, torn between fear and hope. "Your world will destroy me. They will never stop mocking me. And I cannot let my child grow up in shame." Bublo took her hand gently, his eyes burning with sincerity. "There is no shame in honesty, no shame in courage. If my world cannot see that, then it is my world that should change, not you." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the night air heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Pinky whispered, "I am afraid, Bublo." He squeezed her hand. "Then let me be your strength." Unbeknownst to them, Bublo's father watched from the balcony above. His expression was unreadable, but his heart was heavy. He had expected resistance from society, yes, but he had underestimated the cruelty of the world. Still, seeing his son so determined, and Pinky so torn yet so strong, he knew the final decision rested with him. The storm grew fiercer in the days that followed. Invitations from high society stopped altogether. Business partners threatened to cut ties. Even relatives spoke openly of disgrace. Bublo's father faced the weight of it all, silent and calculating. Then, one evening, he called Pinky to his study. She entered nervously, her baby in her arms. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You have endured whispers, insults, humiliation, yet you have not wavered. Tell me, Pinky, do you love my son?" Her eyes widened. She clutched her baby tighter. "Sir, I respect him more than anyone. I am grateful to him. That is not what I asked." The father interrupted gently. "Do you love him?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered at last. But I fear this world will never let us live in peace. The father rose slowly, his voice calm yet commanding. Then let the world be damned. I have searched my whole life for someone who values honesty over gold, humanity over power. If my son has found such a woman, then I will not let society take her away. Her breath caught. She looked up at him in disbelief. You would accept me? The father's stern face softened. You already passed my tests. Now you have passed the world's. Yes, I would accept you. But the road ahead will not be easy. Are you ready for that? Pinky nodded through her tears. I am ready. At that moment, Bublo entered the room, his eyes wide. He had heard enough to know. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and took her hand. She looked at him, trembling, but he only smiled softly. We will face it together. And for the first time, Pinky allowed herself to believe it might be true. He squeezed her hand. Then let me be your strength. Unbeknownst to them, Bublo's father watched from the balcony above. His expression was unreadable, but his heart was heavy. He had expected resistance from society, yes, but he had underestimated the cruelty of the world. Still, seeing his son so determined, and Pinky so torn yet so strong, he knew the final decision rested with him. The storm grew fiercer in the days that followed. Invitations from high society stopped altogether. Business partners threatened to cut ties. Even relatives spoke openly of disgrace. Bublo's father faced the weight of it all, silent and calculating. Then, one evening, he called Pinky to his study. She entered nervously, her baby in her arms. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. You have endured whispers, insults, humiliation, yet you have not wavered. Tell me, Pinky, do you love my son? Her eyes widened. She clutched her baby tighter. Sir, I respect him more than anyone. I am grateful to him. That is not what I asked. The father interrupted gently. Do you love him? Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, she whispered at last. But I fear this world will never let us live in peace. The father rose slowly, his voice calm yet commanding. Then let the world be damned. I have searched my whole life for someone who values honesty over gold, humanity over power. If my son has found such a woman, then I will not let society take her away. Her breath caught. She looked up at him in disbelief. You would accept me? The father's stern face softened. You already passed my tests. Now you have passed the world's. Yes, I would accept you. But the road ahead will not be easy. Are you ready for that? Pinky nodded through her tears. I am ready. At that moment, Bublo entered the room, his eyes wide. He had heard enough to know. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and took her hand. She looked at him, trembling, but he only smiled softly. We will face it together. And for the first time, Pinky allowed herself to believe it might be true. The mansion seemed quieter after Bublo and his father openly supported Pinky. But outside, the storm was only beginning. The news had spread like wildfire. The heir of one of the city's richest families had confessed his love for a maid. Pinky's name was whispered in restaurants, written in gossip columns, and spat out in disgust by those who believed wealth should never mix with poverty. For Pinky, life became more complicated than she had ever imagined. Each time she left the mansion to buy food or walk her baby, she could feel the stares. Women sneered, men laughed, children pointed. Sometimes strangers muttered loud enough for her to hear. Look at her. She thinks she's a queen now. She ignored them, just as she had ignored whispers all her life. But inside, her heart ached. She did not want to be the cause of Bublo's humiliation. She had worked hard to keep her dignity, and now she was being dragged through the mud for something she never asked for, his love. One evening, Bublo's father gathered them in the great hall. He stood tall, his expression serious. "The time has come," he said. "I will announce you, Pinky, not as a maid, but as part of this family. People will protest, they will insult, they will try to ruin us. But I will not hide the truth." Bublo's eyes shone with pride. "Thank you, father." But Pinky's chest tightened. She shook her head quickly. "No, please. Do not make such an announcement because of me. They will never forgive you for it." The father's gaze softened. "They may never forgive me, child. But what matters is that I forgive myself. All my life I worshipped wealth, reputation, and power, and it gave me nothing but shallow friendships and greedy allies. If I deny honesty when it stands before me, then I am truly lost." Pinky lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. Bublo reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We will face it together, just like we promised." The following week, the father held a dinner party, inviting key business partners and influential families. Word spread quickly, and soon the mansion buzzed with guests dressed in shimmering clothes, diamonds sparkling under the chandeliers. Pinky, wearing the simplest dress she owned, stood quietly in a corner with her baby, trying to stay invisible. But invisibility was impossible. The moment people saw her, the whispers began. "Is that her? The maid? How disgraceful!" Finally, the father stood at the center of the hall, his voice firm. "I wish to make an announcement. This young woman, Pinky, is not merely a servant in this house. She is a woman of courage, honesty, and compassion. She is the one who saved my son's life when no one else lifted a finger. And she is the woman my son has chosen. I give them my blessing." Gasps echoed through the hall. Some guests clapped politely, but most looked horrified. A few even left immediately, muttering about ruined reputations. One woman, her face sharp with disdain, approached Pinky directly. "So you think you can rise above your station?" she sneered. "Do you believe a poor maid belongs in a millionaire's house as his wife?" Pinky's hands shook, but she held her baby close and lifted her chin. "I never thought myself above anyone," she said softly. "I only tried to do what was right." The woman laughed cruelly. "Doing what is right? That does not buy you respect, girl. Money does, power does, and you have neither." Before Bublo could step forward, Pinky spoke again, her voice calm but steady. "Then I would rather have nothing and keep my dignity than have everything and lose my soul." The woman's smile faltered. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Bublo's father, watching, felt pride swell in his chest. Bublo himself stepped forward then, placing a protective arm around Pinky. "If anyone here cannot respect the woman I love, they may leave my house immediately." Half the hall emptied within minutes, but Bublo did not care. He stood tall, his hand firmly clasping Pinky's, his eyes daring anyone to challenge him again. That night, after the guests had gone, the father called Bublo and Pinky to his study. He looked tired but resolute. "I have lost friends, partners, perhaps even allies tonight, but I do not regret it. What I gained is far more precious." He looked at Pinky. "Still, the world outside will not rest. They will try harder. You must be prepared." Pinky nodded silently. She had faced hunger, humiliation, loneliness. She could face this too. Days turned into weeks. Business rivals tried to sabotage the father's company. Rumors spread faster than truth. Paparazzi followed Pinky whenever she left the mansion, shouting cruel questions. Bublo stayed by her side as much as he could, but even he felt the weight of the world pressing down. One night he broke. "Why can't they just see you the way I see you?" he said, pacing the room. "Why must they measure everything by money?" Why can't love be enough? Pinky, sitting with her baby, smiled sadly. Because love is rare, Pablo. Most people do not understand it until they lose it. We cannot expect them to see what they have never known. He stopped, staring at her. And you? How do you remain so calm through all of this? She looked down at her child, stroking his tiny hand. Because I have faced worse, Pablo. Poverty is a teacher. Teaches patience. Teaches survival. And it teaches that dignity is worth more than gold. He sank beside her, burying his face in his hands. Sometimes I fear I am not as strong as you. She touched his shoulder gently. Then lean on me. We will be strong together. It was in that moment that Pablo realized something profound. Pinky was not only the woman he loved. She was the woman who could carry him through storms he never thought he could survive. The next day, his father made another bold decision. We will not hide anymore, he declared. I will arrange a public gathering. The media will be there. And I will stand before them and declare her as the future of this house. Pablo hesitated. He knew the backlash would be merciless. But when he looked at Pinky, who stood with quiet determination, he found his answer. Do it, father. We are ready. The preparations began. Invitations were sent. Reporters circled the mansion like vultures, eager for the scandal to explode. Servants whispered anxiously, but Pinky continued her duties, never asking for special treatment. She fed her child, swept the floors, and lived as she always had. Simple, honest, unshaken. On the night of the event, the grand hall filled with flashing cameras and murmuring reporters. Pablo stood tall beside his father, but all eyes were on Pinky as she entered, holding her baby. She wore a modest white dress the mansion's seamstress had made for her, nothing extravagant, yet she glowed with dignity. The father stepped forward, raising his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Pinky, the woman who saved my son's life, the woman whose honesty and humanity outshine wealth itself. She is not a maid in my eyes. She is family. The hall erupted with questions, shouts, even protests. Reporters fired accusations. Is this a publicity stunt? Do you not fear the collapse of your business? How can a poor woman represent your empire? Pinky, trembling, stepped forward. Her baby stirred in her arms, and she pressed him close. Then she spoke, her voice soft but carrying. I never asked to be here. I never dreamed of this life. I only did what was right when I saw a man in need. If you think that makes me unworthy, then perhaps worthiness is not what it should be. I do not seek riches. I do not seek power. I only seek to live honestly, to raise my child with dignity, and to stand by those who trust me. If that is not enough for this world, then I will still remain the same Pinky I have always been. For a moment the hall fell silent. The cameras clicked, but no one spoke. Pablo's heart swelled with pride. His father's eyes gleamed with approval. And in that silence, Pinky realized something she had never felt before. Not fear, not humiliation, but strength. The world could hurl its stones, but she had already won.